I messed up and it feels like my wife will never move past it. Should I keep letting her punish me or is it time to say enough is enough? Posted in r/marriage advice. I, 35M, have been married to my wife, 32F, for 6 years, together for 10. We have 2 kids, a son, 5M, and a daughter just born last year. The issue started a year and a half ago when I was asked to resign from my job. I'll admit it, losing the job was my fault. A more experienced coworker and I didn't see eye to eye on anything. She went behind my back and spoke poorly of me to our mutual boss, and I simply refused to do things the way she wanted them done. And I was a bit of a prick about it. Never anything that could get me in trouble with HR, but enough to make it obvious I didn't like her and didn't want to be there. So, eventually, I wasn't. My wife never wanted me to take the job in the first place and spent the entire 2 years I worked there reminding me of that fact. She told me over and over that if I didn't just go along to get along, I'd end up in trouble, and when she turned out to be right, our marriage took a big hit. She was pregnant with our daughter at the time and suddenly became the primary breadwinner, and the stress was too much. When I didn't find a new job immediately, her anger grew and she asked me to leave. Since then, I have busted my ass to make it right. I found a crappy part-time job, shout out to Target, until I landed a much better job in my field. I spent a year in therapy, working through my issues, especially why I couldn't put my family first and my pride second. After about 6 months of crashing in my cousin's spare bedroom, my wife let me come home. But not fully. I sleep in the basement, on an old fold-out couch that the previous homeowners left behind. There's been no intimacy between us since we conceived our daughter, and since I came back, that's extended from just being no sex to being no nothing. No kisses, no hugs. If I even get near her for anything other than taking the baby for a diaper change, I get reprimanded. I'm working 3 jobs now to try and compensate for the losses when I was unemployed, and one is a work-from-home job late at night, which she constantly interrupts me at, always over something she can turn into a fight. Last week it was about the dog and why I hadn't taken her out and how that was the reason she went to the bathroom on the living room floor. For context, I got home from job number 1, changed, went to job number 2, and then got home just in time to start work at job number 3. She was off the entire day for lunch with her mom and the kids and was home when I got there and left and came back. Yesterday was the point where I started to wonder if there's really no saving the marriage. Our son had to get tubes put in his ears because he inherited my habit of getting almost monthly ear infections. They told us that he'd probably feel awful for the rest of the day and would likely run a fever, but if those were the only issues, there was no need to call or bring him back. My MIL came to help out, and when my son, as predicted, spiked a fever, 100.2, she and my wife both became extremely upset and demanded that I call the doctor. I tried to point out that they specifically said this would happen, but neither of them would listen. My MIL said that part of parenting was knowing better than a doctor and that I had clearly not learned anything about not always thinking I knew best. Yeah, I see the contradiction, but my wife didn't. I took her aside into our bedroom and tried to talk calmly, but she wasn't budging and kept telling me that her mother knew what was right. I asked her, point blank, if my opinion even mattered or if her mother's was the only one that did. She said that she was listening to her mom because, unlike mine, at least her opinion I can respect. I called the doctor. They said to give my son a popsicle. I did. He felt better. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the corner of the living room, not speaking, and only doing what my wife or MIL said we should. Eventually, my wife took our son to sleep with her in the master bedroom and my MIL took the guest room and I went back downstairs. I know I effed up. I know I have things to atone for. But is this me making up for my mistakes or me getting my ass kicked because no one in my family respects me anymore? TLDR, I lost my job through my own fault, putting undue stress on my pregnant wife, and moved out while going through therapy and finding 3 new jobs. I'm living at home again but still disconnected from my wife, and she told me she longer respects my opinion. What should I do? Second post. Anxiety that turns to panic. Posted in r/anxiety. My family went out of town for the weekend and I stayed home to get some things done around the house. They're due back in a few hours and I'm on Reddit because I can't deal with anything else at the moment. I've been anxious since I got up this morning and every thought has been about whether I did enough while they were gone. I've made 3 lists of what I did and what I didn't do and why not, and it hasn't helped. If I don't distract myself, spending too much time reading Ada, the anxiety morphs into panic and I can't calm/soothe myself. But then I get even more concerned because posting and replying on Reddit is not exactly a healthy coping mechanism. Third post. Update: I messed up and it feels like my wife will never move past it. Should I keep letting her punish me or is it time to say enough is enough? Posted in our/marriage advice. So, I absolutely did not expect more than 400 comments. I read, almost, all of them and I really appreciate them all, even the ones that raked me over the coals for being a lazy sob who does nothing to help his wife. I hadn't planned on updating this but, as it turns out, I have literally no one else I can talk to about it, so here you go. Before the actual update, a quick note about the does nothing to help his wife stuff. I put this in a few comments, but I think I should mention it here. Since I moved back in, I have been doing my damnedest to pull my weight both in terms of a paycheck and in being a dad/husband/partner. A lot of you commented on me working 3 jobs, a point in the update, too, and maybe I wasn't doing much at home. My work schedule: 1 FT job 5 days a week, PT job 2 nights a week from 7 to 9. PT online job 1 to 4 nights a week, from September 10th until midnight. On weekday mornings, I get the kids up and fed before dropping them at daycare, my parents. I pick them up from daycare after work, bring them home and feed them before my wife gets home. March 5th nights, either we've made something in the crock pot or I attempt to cook dinner. It's a crapshoot as to whether it's good or not. The other 2 nights, I grab a sandwich or protein shake on my way out the door and my wife usually orders out. Those 3 nights I'm home we trade off getting the kids to bed. That's the only time I spend in the master bedroom, putting the baby down for bed or a nap. I handle other chores as needed, as does she. I will willingly take criticism for what I messed up, but I think I'm pulling my weight now. Some commenters seem to disagree. As for the update, my wife took the kids to her family's camp for the weekend while I stayed home and did some work on the house that needed to be done. When she got home Sunday night and the kids had gone off to sleep, I asked her if we could talk for a minute and she agreed. I went in armed with what a lot of you had suggested: marriage counseling and me cutting back on the 3 jobs to have more time with her. I did not share my post as I knew she wouldn't react well. She didn't react well, anyway. Basically, she brushed past the counseling idea and focused on the me not working 3 jobs topic, and let's just say that I will be working 3 jobs for the foreseeable future. She framed it as me trying to shirk my duties and thinking that since I was back in the house, there was nothing more I needed to do. And even if that wasn't why I was suggesting it, it was still a no-go. Turns out, she wants to cut back on her hours, maybe even going PT. There were hints of quitting outright. And she can't do that if we don't have my 3 incomes. She didn't put it this way, but I can definitely see that letting her cut back would only be fair, given my initial screw-up. I feel like it's right to find a way to take some of the pressure off her and put it on me. She hasn't finalized a plan for how she's going to cut back, but that's where we're headed. On a related note, she brought up that my jobs were one of the reasons I was staying in the basement. That's where the office space is, and since I work until midnight, it only makes sense. We didn't really talk about what the other reasons might be for me not sleeping in our room. It was late and she'd had a long weekend, so I let the rest slide for the night. Then, last night, Monday, I approached her again about the counseling. I'd contacted my IC and asked for some MC recommendations. I gave my wife all 4 that my IC had suggested and said we could go to whichever one she picked. I didn't make it an ultimatum, but I did stress how important it was. I told her that I'm in this for the long haul and I know there's trust and comfortability that needs to be rebuilt, and seeing a professional might help us do that in a better way. She chose one of the 4, more or less randomly. I suspect it was because she was the only female option, and told me to make an appointment. But it couldn't be on a Wednesday night as she and her mother and sister had decided that Wednesdays were going to be girls' nights. I don't work job number 2 on Wednesdays, so I can watch the kids, and she'd likely be crashing at her parents' or sister's house on those nights. I agreed, which I know was more of a formality and me being polite than anything else, and called today to make an appointment. We have a Zoom getting to know you session later this week. This counselor likes to meet that way for the first appointment, just to make sure that we all feel like it's a good fit and we'll be able to work together. She also emailed me a little questionnaire kind of thing that my wife and I each need to fill out. It's about our current concerns and our long-term goals. I've been staring at it for like an hour and I have no idea what to write that won't sound defensive, like I'm making excuses, or focused on the wrong things. I mean, how do I list the fact that my wife won't so much as let us accidentally brush up against each other in the hall as a concern without making it sound as if all I'm concerned with is sex? Especially since I tried bringing up a date night and got told that we aren't there right now, and she clearly thought I was pushing for something sexual, even when I suggested just going for a walk by the lake. I guess I just don't frame my suggestions or ideas very well, since I keep giving her the wrong idea. So, that's where we're at. I might update after the Zoom or when we have an actual in-person session. Or if anything else happens. Like I said, I appreciate the feedback and all, and I don't have many other outlets for any of this. Most of my friends were either friends from the job I lost or are friends, and talking to them would be putting them in the middle, especially after they saw me get kicked out of my home. I don't think I want to know how any of them see me / us right now. So, all you anonymous internet strangers might just be stuck with me. TLDR, I brought up counseling, date nights, and cutting back on my 3 jobs to my wife. She shot down me leaving a job as she wants to scale back on her own hours. We have a Zoom session with a counselor, and date nights were flat out rejected. 4th post. When do you know it's time? Posted in our /divorce. Wife, 32F. And I, 35M, hit a rough patch a year and a half ago when I lost my job. We separated temporarily, I moved out, but are now living together again. 2 kids, 5M and a baby girl, born after the job loss. I'm living in the basement, working 3 jobs, and we're amicable with each other most of the time, but no intimacy or physical contact of any sort since before she got pregnant. We're starting MC, at my request, and have our first full session next week. I've posted about this on a different sub, and divorce has been recommended a lot. Like a lot. I've said it's not an option because I don't want it to be. But it's hard to ignore the idea at this point. For those who went the MC route, how long did you try before you realized there was no point? I'm really hoping to work things out, but I'm starting to realize my situation might be untenable in the long term, and I like to have some sort of goal or time frame to work towards. I did a year of IC and found it very helpful, so that's sort of been my benchmark, but I'm not sure a year without any kind of change is something I can live with. What would be reasonable expectations for me to have? 5th post. I didn't realize how much my family doesn't care until I came to Reddit. Posted in our /true off my chest. I spend a lot of time online due to my job, one of the 3, and so I spend a lot of time on Reddit. I post every once in a while in some of the subs of things I enjoy, like bands and shows and things like that. I've never posted anything really personal until last week. I tried to post about this the other day, but it was way over the top and emotional and too much like seeking advice, but I think I can be a bit calmer and get it off my chest now. My marriage hit a rough spot, so I posted for some unbiased opinions from internet strangers to help me figure out my next moves. I got a lot of that advice. Like, a lot, and it was helpful, mostly. Even the people who called me a simp and insisted there must be cheating going. I probably am, and there's probably not. I felt like people were really listening to me, and I thought that was a good thing. Until I realized that they were the only ones listening. Posting and reading comments and replying has been good because I don't have anyone else to talk to about any of it. But it sucked because it's highlighted the fact that I don't have anyone else to talk to about any of it. My friends are all my wife's friends, or, at best, are friends, and no one wants to take sides. I can't talk to her about it, obviously. And that just leaves my family, and that's when it hit me. They just don't care. My wife has described my father as an emotional black hole that swallowed an iceberg, and she's not really wrong. And my mother. I'm her only child, which means that my kids are her only grandkids. They're also the only ones she's gonna get, and that means that my value to her is entirely contingent on access to them. If my marriage fails, her access gets cut in half, and that just can't be, so it's either help me and give me someone to talk to, act as a sounding board, give me support to help me get through being kicked out of my house and then let back in but exiled to the basement, or tell me to fix whatever I fucked up as it's clearly my fault, and spend her time and energy focusing on becoming the second mother my wife's always wanted her to be. 3. Guess which option my mom chose. I don't matter to anyone in my life in any way other than what I can do for them. For my wife, it's 3 jobs worth of paychecks and help with the kids. For my MIL, it's giving her a target to punish in retaliation for her own history of abuse. For my parents, it's access to my kids. And all of them could be just fine without me providing that. Just fine without me. My mother texted me yesterday to ask me something about my son. One text. First time I've heard from her in a week and a half. After I replied to my mom's question, I asked how she was and if she and my dad had any plans for the weekend. She left me on read, but that didn't matter, I already knew the answer. They're taking my kids and my wife to a pool party at the animal park. I overheard my mom and my wife talking about it on FaceTime a couple nights ago. They were on the call for more than an hour. I haven't talked to my mother or my wife for an hour combined in the last month. I've always known my parents weren't what anyone would call emotionally available, at least not for me. And I knew they always find a way to assign the blame for damn near everything to me. When I was bullied as a kid, they asked me what I did to make the other kids hate me, and when my college GF started sleeping with my best friend from home, my mom's other son all through high school, they urged me to forgive them both as they couldn't help who they loved and I'm a hard person to be close to. When my wife kicked me out after I lost my job, I asked my parents to let me stay with them temporarily as they have an empty and unused bedroom that was mine for years, and they said no. And still, I didn't really put it together. I didn't really grasp how much they just don't care until people on Reddit read what I said about them and pointed it out to me. I was so used to it all that it just felt normal, and even now, even when I recognize that it's not, I still won't do anything about it. They'll show up tomorrow morning to pick up my wife and my kids and I won't say a word. I don't even know if I'll come upstairs or if I'll just stay in the basement. I think I'll probably just stay downstairs with my dog until they've come and gone. It's easier to ignore being ignored if you don't have to watch it happen. Relevant comments. Commenter. I'll be honest here. You know you better than us and you know them better than us. That being said, I would not stand living that life of yours. Sure, you have your faults, but still? This is over the top, unless you are just bitching and whining to us and exaggerate and avoid facing your own faults. Anyway, I will assume you are honest. This is not a healthy environment. I would tell my parents exactly what you told us, at least then you know where you stand. It is your responsibility to make sure you have a spine and your life is bearable. 6th post. Ada for snapping at my mom and hurting her feelings after she referred to my wife as a single parent? Posted in r/Ada. I, 35M, went on a family outing over the weekend with my wife, kids, male, FAL, and my parents, and my mother said something that didn't sit right with me and I'm not sure I handled it well. Okay, I know I didn't handle it well since I snapped at her in the zoo food court and took my son and walked off, but I'm not sure if not well equals being the AH. My wife, in-laws, and parents all seem to think so, but I hope some unbiased opinions might see it differently. There's a lot I'm dealing with at the moment in terms of my marriage, and a divorce is a possibility. Long story short, I lost my job when my wife was pregnant, leaving her as the sole breadwinner. She kicked me out for 6 months. I moved back in after getting 3 jobs, all of which I still have, but I'm living in the basement, no intimacy or physical contact of any kind, and we're starting marriage counseling this week. I posted on Reddit for some anonymous feedback, most of which was solidly in that she's being abusive and I'm being a simp/martyr category, and, as a result, I've been taking a long, hard look at all the relationships in my life, especially with my family. Which brings us to last weekend when my wife made plans to take both our kids, 5M and infant daughter, to a pool party event at our local zoo with her parents and mine, but not me. I mentioned my exclusion and she had several reasons for not inviting me which aren't really relevant here, but when I pushed and asked to be included, she relented and invited me along. That was the start of the issue. Her parents aren't that fond of me right now, or ever, and my own parents are more concerned with keeping the peace with my wife, so as to not risk losing contact with my kids if divorce comes to pass. So, my joining the zoo trip upped the tension immediately as my in-laws assumed I pressured my wife into letting me come along and were barely civil, and my parents were clearly worried that I was going to cause some sort of argument or blow up, which, in hindsight, was probably a valid concern. It started off with little things. My wife was carrying the baby and my mother insisted on holding my son's hand and walking as far on the other side of the group from me as possible. My son was playing in the animal-themed bouncy house, and had long exceeded the allowed time, but when I tried to get him, my mom told me to let him have his fun and stop wrecking the mood. When we all went for a ride on the little train that goes all around the zoo, I was the one in the last car by myself while the grandmas each had a kid. The only time anyone actually talked to me was to ask me for something out of the diaper bag, send me off to buy waters and sodas, or tell me to lighten up. Everything came to a head when we went to the food court to enjoy the AC. It was like 100 degrees outside, and some snacks. My wife is usually very anti-sugar, so no candy or cookies, but my mother bought my son 2 bags of Skittles anyway, and when I tried to tell her not to, she gave me some line about grandma knowing best and getting special privileges. But the problem really came when we all sat down and my mother started talking with my wife about what it was like to have 2 kids, both so young. For context, I am an only child and my parents have said repeatedly over the years that that's by design. They only ever wanted 1 kid. They've also mentioned, more than once, that my mom had a miscarriage before she had me, so there's a layer of I was the second choice crap in there for me to deal with. I understand that they didn't actually make a choice and all that, but there's been more than a few incidents in my life where they took someone else's side over mine, including when my wife kicked me out and they refused to let me stay with them. That feeling second best is sort of baked into my DNA. My mom told my wife that's always impressed by parents who can handle multiple kids because she knew right from the beginning that she couldn't do it. And she said it was especially impressive when those kids are both so young and such a handful. All good, all true, no issue so far. And then my mother said to my wife that it must be even more difficult doing it as a single parent. Remember that I am not my wife's favorite person right now, and her parents really don't like me. But I swear to you, every one of their heads snapped up when my mom said it, staring at her with almost coordinated WTF looks on their faces. To her credit, my wife tried to save my mom from herself by pointing out that she wasn't in any way single, and no matter what's been going on with us, I've always contributed to taking care of the kids, which was the most credit she's given me for anything in a year and a half. My mom nodded along and said that of course, you're not actually single, and everyone tensed because we knew the butt was coming, but I'd left her alone for 6 months and that even I've admitted that I'd failed her as a partner, so even though I was back in the house now, she could only imagine that my wife probably felt like she was still doing it all on her own. No one spoke up for me that time. My emotions have been right below the surface for months and I couldn't tell if I was going to cry or throw one of the bags of Skittles at my mom or both. I usually favor a shut down completely kind of conflict avoidance, but I just couldn't do it. I stood up, probably more forcefully than I needed to as my chair almost tipped over, stepped around my mom, collected my son from his seat, with his bag of candy, and started walking away. Someone asked me where I was going and I snapped, without even looking back, that I was taking my son to see the penguins and we'd meet everyone back at the cars. It would be good for me, I said, to get some practice as a single parent, so I don't fail at that too. It sounds way more badass than it was, since I had started crying by then and my voice cracked and made me sound like a whiny teenage boy, but it made the point. My parents left while my son and I were at the penguin habitat, leaving it to my in-laws to drive the rest of us home. My FIL pulled me aside when they dropped us off to talk to me privately. He told me that my mother had left in tears and that clearly she hadn't meant what she said in that way, and I shouldn't be so sensitive about things like that since I was the one who fucked up in the first place and even opened the single-parent door. My wife said much the same thing after we got the kids to bed, before I went to the basement to work my online job. And I've gotten 4 or 5 "I'm sorry you feel that way" but texts from my mother and 1 apologies heal text from my dad since. I drop the kids off at their house every morning before I head to work, and yesterday and today, my dad was the only one who came out to greet me. My mom's still texting my wife pictures of the kids throughout the day, but she never sent them to me anyway, so it's not like I would have noticed it as some sort of silent treatment. So, have at it, Reddit. Am I the AH for snapping at my mother and clearly hurting her feelings? TLDR, family went to the zoo. My mom referred to my wife as a single parent since I'd temporarily moved out of our home for 6 months. I snapped at her and took my son and walked off. Edit, I thought I wrote it clearly enough, but I guess not. My wife kicked me out because I lost my job and didn't get a new one immediately. That left the financial burden on her and she felt betrayed and wanted space. Relevant comments. Commenter. It sounds like you might benefit from a divorce. You can work on yourself and have time alone with your children. I'd let your wife decide how much time she wants to devote to your parents. It sounds like you have a lot to unwrap from your childhood. Addressing all that will make you a better parent. Also look for one good job. Commenter. I've read your entire post history, and if I may say so, I think your wife has already mentally checked out of this relationship. At this point, her asking to go part-time or totally be a som while you keep 3 jobs is for a bigger alimony. You've done the work, pull your share of the load and seem to be trying to fix this. To me, it sounds like everyone finds it easier to shit on you instead of calling your wife out for her current behavior because they don't want to lose the grandkids. Your parents and in-laws are being AHs. I would suggest individual therapy to start rebuilding your own spirit. Sounds to me like you need more help than you're letting on. Focus on the marriage counseling and be open and honest there. Your wife may just be very angry and resentful still, and she won't admit it. At the same time, discreetly speak with an absolute shark of a divorce attorney to get all your legal options figured out for the best and fairest outcome. It is possible that if your marriage ends, your wife will do her best to make it as ugly as possible. And your parents and in-laws will be of zero support. The more prepared you are for any outcome, the better you'll come out at the end of it. It's very ugly, but take it one day at a time. ETA, document everything. Her behavior, your solutions, steps you've taken, measures implemented to earn her trust, etc. Be as detailed as possible. You will need it. OP. I did therapy for a year after I lost my job. Not currently seeing anyone as with 3 jobs, I don't have a lot of time for it and now that time needs to be devoted to MC. But I know I need help. I need to figure out what's legit and reasonable guilt that I should be feeling and what's my personal history making me feel like deserve continuous punishment. 7th post. Update 2. I messed up and it feels like my wife will never move past it. Should I keep letting her punish me or is it time to say enough is enough? Posted in our /marriageadvice. Not sure if anyone was waiting for another update, but writing about it all helps me process, so. Sort of an update. I posted on Ada about an interaction I had with my mom while I was out with my wife, kids, in-laws, and my parents. I think a lot of people thought I was an for it and they might have been right. If you didn't see it, I basically snapped at my mom after she twice referred to my wife as a single parent in front of me, my wife, and in-laws. I probably should have been more mature about it, but I let my anger get the best of me at that moment. But it connects to the actual update as, surprisingly, a day or so after I posted, my wife apologized to me for what my mom said. My mom still hasn't. My wife, who I'm going to start calling Carrie so I can stop saying my wife every time, wanted me to know that she had never said anything like that or referred to herself as a single parent or to me as a failed or absent parent. She had no idea where my mom got that phrasing from or why she said it, but Carrie said she was sorry my mother said it and that she has never thought of me that way. Despite my fuck up with the job, she said she's always known that I would do my best to be a good father and would never abandon my kids. That was the first positive thing she said about me in a while, so I thanked her and counted that as a win. But it was the only one, really. We had our first counseling session last night, after the Zoom meet and greet last week. During the Zoom session, our counselor asked us to share some of what we'd written down on the pre-session questionnaire. Specifically, she asked for each of us to tell the other what our goals were for counseling. I said, to work on healing the damage done by my mistake and to build our relationship back with both of us being able to love and respect each other. Carrie said, to get to a point where she could trust me again and to find a way to let go of the significant resentment she feels toward me. The counselor instructed us not to talk about any of that until we had a session, so that we didn't risk setting ourselves back. So, that's where we started our first actual session, with our goals and how they didn't seem to align quite as much as we might like. Counselor asked me if I'd been so specific about love and respect in my goal because I didn't feel as if those existed in our current relationship. The sarcastic ass in me wanted to say gee, you think, but I did learn something in my individual therapy, so I just said yes. I pointed out that being banished to the basement, watching Carrie avoid any and all physical contact, and the conversation about respecting her mother's opinion but not mine made me feel like there was no respect and I wasn't even sure if there was love there anymore. The counselor asked Carrie if she respected me. Carrie said she wants to, but given how I screwed up, it's hard to feel that right now. And then the counselor asked her if she loved me. Carrie said, again, that she wants to, but it's pretty much impossible for her to answer that at this point, as anything she might feel for me is buried under all of that resentment. That was why she's avoided any contact and there's been no intimacy between us, physical or otherwise. Being close to me like that while still dealing with those very negative feelings was just too much cognitive dissonance for her. That was when we switched gears and addressed her resentment, which, I thought, was caused by me not listening to her advice and losing my job and putting unfair burdens on her. And it was. But that wasn't where it really started. It's been less than 24 hours and I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this, but I guess the question of why she resents me was like tearing down Hoover Dam because everything came flooding out. In the span of about 20 uninterrupted minutes, I found out that Carrie's mother has never liked me and thought we were a bad fit right from the start. My presence at family gatherings and on family vacations has been a source of annoyance and aggravation for most of the maternal side of Carrie's family, to the point where they've actively tried to find ways to schedule things when I'm not available. My MAL pulled Carrie aside and asked her if she was sure she wanted to marry me and said that she knew I would never make her happy on our wedding day. In the months prior to our son being born, Carrie was convinced that I was cheating on her and she told her mom and sister about it. And even when she realized that I wasn't, MAL and SAL have never been able to quite let the idea go. So, some context for that last one that I never brought up because I didn't think it mattered. When Carrie and I met 10 plus years ago, I had a best friend, we'll call her Ellie. Ellie and I had gone to college together and were in the same major and just clicked as friends. I've often called her my sister, and when Carrie and I met, Ellie was already engaged to her now husband, and there's never been anything remotely non-platonic between us, and the mere thought of it makes me want to laugh/puke. Ellie was my best man at our wedding, and even though she's since moved fairly far away, we still get together a few times a year and text all the time. As far as I knew, Carrie liked Ellie. I don't know that I would have called them besties or anything, but they hung out without me sometimes and no one ever gave me any indication that anything about my relationship with Ellie was in any way suspect. But, I guess it was. During her first pregnancy, Carrie spent a lot of time with her mom and sister. Sael had just had a baby and Carrie had awful morning sickness to the point of being taken out of work and just wanted the comfort of mom's love. Her job let her work remotely, so she would go visit my MAL a few days a week and I would go to their house when my schedule at work allowed. During that time, we had a few more arguments than usual, which my MAL told me I should chalk up to pregnancy hormones, and, more than once, when I would argue with her, Carrie would snap at me and ask me, "Who told you that?" Ellie, as if I couldn't have a thought of my own. Somewhere along the way, Carrie got it in her head that I wasn't coming to MAL's house not because I was working. I was, mostly really early days that made a 90-minute commute from the in-laws too difficult to manage, but because I was spending time with Ellie. I wasn't. Ellie wasn't in the country, which, if I'd known what was happening, I would have told Carrie. But I didn't, and so she spent several weeks living with the absolute certainty that I was cheating on her. She only realized that I wasn't when I actually did mention that Ellie was in Germany with her husband's family and had been there for 2 months. But the thought of me being unfaithful only served to make MAL and Sael's dislike for me worse, and by the time the truth was discovered, the mountain of shit they'd buried me under was too deep for them to get out of, but Carrie defended me. She called her mom out for being inappropriate at the wedding. She told her sister that I was just as decent and kind as her husband. She even said she liked my admittedly sometimes too much sense of humor, even if I did make a few too many smart-ass comments, and even if a lot, of my jokes died quick deaths. All of that, she said, is what's caused her current resentment for me to go nuclear. Because she stood up for me and defended me and told her family they were wrong about me, and then I went and lost my job and, in her words, proved them all right. So, yeah. There's a bit to unpack. I really didn't respond in the session. I felt attacked, and when I feel that way, I tend to shut down. Our counselor picked up on that and said we could address how I was feeling about everything next week. She ended the session by asking us each to identify one thing the other could do to help demonstrate our commitment to the process and our marriage. I said that Carrie could let me move back upstairs. She agreed. So, now I'm in the guest room, at least until MAL or SAL come and need it. And Carrie brought up the cutting back of her work hours so she could go have girls' nights with her mom and sister and friends. To her credit, after everything she just unloaded about them, she said it would be okay if I took a week to think about that. Even just writing it all out made my head hurt. And I have no idea what to do with any of it. But since I know someone's going to say it in the comments, yes, Carrie's insistence that I was cheating is raising a huge red flag of projection for me, especially with how most comments about girls' nights on the last post suggested it was a cover for her to cheat on me. If anyone's still interested, I can update again if anything happens or after the next session. Like I said, it helps me to process. Even when I get told that I'm the AH or a simp. Sometimes, it's the harshest feedback that makes things clearer. TLDR, my wife and I had our first counseling session. She revealed long-standing anger and hatred for me from her family, that she once suspected me of cheating on her, and that she has such significant resentment for me that she doesn't know if she loves me anymore. But I get to sleep in the guest room instead of the basement. 8th post. Ada for asking my wife to choose our family over hers? Posted in r/Ada. I posted on here a bit ago about a situation when I sort of forced my way into a zoo trip my wife had planned with the kids, my parents, and my in-laws. See my previous post. A lot of people thought I was the AH for doing that, even though that wasn't the point of the post. But now, I've found myself in a similar situation and tried doing the opposite, and it doesn't seem to be working out any better. So, my wife has already told me that I am the AH in this situation, even if she didn't use those exact words. And I know nothing Reddit has to say about it would change her mind, especially since I won't/can't tell her that I'm even posting about it, but I'm starting to question my own judgment a bit here, so maybe you all can set me straight. My wife and I are in the middle of a really rough patch in our marriage. We separated for 6 months, and even when we ended the separation, the issues that caused it weren't fixed. Long story short, I lost my job when she was pregnant. She asked me to move out. When I moved back in, I was sleeping in the basement for quite a while. She's refused any sort of physical contact, and we've just started marriage counseling. Second session was last night. And in MC, I've come to learn that her family more or less hates me. Or, at the very least, doesn't trust me. Like, not at all. During our MC session last night, our therapist said that it was important for us to start spending more time together, both as a family, 2 kids, and as a couple. My wife was resistant to the idea of date nights, so the counselor reframed it as exposure therapy. Basically, she said that neither of us will ever get past the barriers that have built up in our relationship if we continue to essentially live separate lives. My wife seemed to understand that and was fairly receptive to the idea, at least while we were in the counselor's office. Which brings us to this weekend. In America, it's a holiday weekend, and our family has a long-standing tradition of spending the 3-day weekend at my in-laws' camp on a lake. My Sale and her family come, and most of my wife's extended family pops in at least for an afternoon/evening or two, even if they don't spend the night. Some of her and my Sale's friends from high school usually drop by for a catch-up, too, and I know my wife has been trying to reconnect with friends in an effort to find an identity outside of just being a mom and a wife. But, given our current marital strife, the knowledge that my MAL has actively and repeatedly tried to convince my wife that we should not be together, which I've known about for barely a week, my new and growing worry that my mistakes are now a black cloud hanging over my relationships with all of my wife's family and friends, and that due to space constraints, we'd not only have to share a room but also a bed, it seemed to me like heading to camp should be a no-go. My wife didn't agree. In fact, 15 minutes after we got home from our MC session last night, she started packing up for the weekend. But she was only packing for her and the kids. She didn't come right out and say it, but it was pretty obvious, even to usually oblivious me, that the plan was for my family to go to the lake without me, even though we'd just been told a little more than an hour before that we needed to spend time together. I tried pointing that out in as calm and as non-confrontational a way as I could, using the "I feel" statements that our therapist suggested. I said to my wife, I feel like this weekend is a really good opportunity for us to spend time together as a family, and I really feel like if 3/4 of us go to camp, that isn't just living separate lives but making a point of living separate lives. At first, she thought I was trying to be included in the trip and go with her and the kids, much like I forced my way into the zoo trip. I quickly explained that no, that was 100% not what I wanted, without even mentioning that being around my MAL for an entire weekend would have required my entire bottle of Xanax, and what I was hoping for was that she and the kids could stay home with me. There's a whole bunch of picnic and barbecue and block party events going on in and around our neighborhood, and I thought we could go to some of those and spend time as a family. In my head, starting off by doing something as a whole family instead of just as a couple would build in a buffer for her, would give me a chance to show that I can be a real partner in parenting, and would let her see me in what I know is my best light, as a dad. That was what I thought in my head, but apparently, my head and my wife's head were not on the same page, as she said no to that idea by saying, "I want to spend the weekend with my family." One thing our therapist stressed repeatedly was that to have any chance at productive conversations, we both need to avoid any kind of escalation in our communication, which was probably because things escalated more than once during our latest session. So, I took a deep breath and did not point out that spending the weekend with me and the kids would be spending it with her family. And despite what many Redditors have said I should do, I didn't lay out any ultimatums or ask her to cut back on contact with her family or suggest that she was planning some kind of lakeside hookup with some guy my MIL might better approve of. But this is when I might have been the AH, or definitely was, according to my wife. I tried sticking to the I feel idea and told her that I felt like if she took the kids and went to camp without me, especially if she went less than a day after our counselor said we needed more time together, that she was making a choice and that choice was clearly not us. So, in her mind, for all intents and purposes, I gave her an ultimatum. Do you think she took that well and we were able to have a calm and productive and healthy conversation about it and maybe even come to some sort of compromise? Do you think I'd be posting this at almost midnight on the Friday of a holiday weekend because my blood pressure is through the roof and I can't sleep if she did? She told me, in no uncertain terms, that I was an AH for laying that all on her, reminded me that it was my choices that got us here in the first place, stopped packing, and after making sure both kids were asleep, she went into our bedroom, which has been only her bedroom for the last year, shut the door and locked it. And now I have no idea if I'm going to wake up to my wife and kids waiting to hang out with me and spend the next 3 days together or if they'll be on the road to camp before the sun is even up. I do know that she thinks I am absolutely the AH. And I kinda think she might be right. Ada for telling my wife she was choosing her family over her family with me and the kids? Relevant comments. Commenter. Sir, she doesn't want to be married to you anymore. Please get far away from this toxic situation and make sure you get a court-ordered parenting plan in place. 9th post. Update, Ada for asking my wife to choose our family over hers? Posted in r/Ada. I got a comment yesterday wondering if my silence was a positive or negative sign. It was a sign of a crazy week at work, so I thought I should take the chance to post an update today since I have a bit of time. You can see the specific incident I'm updating in my previous post, and there's a bunch of posts on my history from the sub I originally started posting on, if you want more background/context or reasons to question whether I have a spine. I mentioned in a comment reply to my last post that my wife actually woke me up early the morning after I had basically given her an ultimatum to choose between our family and her family. She wanted to talk before she and the kids left for my in-laws' camp. TBH, I was expecting it to be that I'm not coming back or we should get lawyers talk, but it wasn't. To my surprise, my wife, I called her Carrie on the other sub, so I will do so here, too, actually apologized. She said the comment about wanting to spend the weekend with her family had been out of line and intended to hurt me. She was pissed, annoyed at me because she knew I was kinda right about what I was saying, and she lashed out. It's not the first time that's happened, so her explanation didn't shock me that much. But she also said that she understood where I was coming from. If we want to fix things, and we've both said we do, then lashing out like that needs to stop and we do need to spend time together as a family. And she completely got why choosing to spend the entire weekend with her family, whose dislike for me had just become public knowledge, instead of being with me might have been upsetting for me. For a moment, I thought she was going to invite me to camp with her, and I'm not gonna lie, I was panicking. I was worried that right after I'd more or less demanded she spend time with me, I was going to have to refuse an invitation to do exactly that. But there was no chance I was going to willingly spend 3 days with my MIL or SAL, particularly not after our last counseling session. Carrie didn't invite me. Instead, she offered a compromise. She and the kids would go to camp Saturday and stay until midday Sunday, then come home and spend the rest of the weekend with me. There were some family members of hers who live out in California who would be there on Saturday, and she doesn't get to see them very often, so that actually felt really fair to me, and like Carrie was putting in an honest effort to try and meet me halfway, so I agreed. They left for camp that morning and came back on Sunday, as planned, and we had a really nice day and a half together. There was a block party kind of thing on Monday, and we took the kids to that, and I made sure to handle baby duty with our daughter as much as possible, to give Carrie a break. She seemed pretty appreciative of that and got to spend some time with a few of our neighbors that she struck up friendships with and introduced me to some of them who I hadn't met yet. It was nice. It felt normal, I guess. But as the day wore on and it got to be time to head back home, I started getting anxious. The kids were wiped and would clearly be heading straight to bed, which would leave me and Carrie alone for more than the hour or so we'd had on Sunday night. If we followed the counselor's advice, we should spend that time together. I was under no illusion that spending time was going to result in any sort of spousal relations or anything like that, but there would have to be talking and I was concerned about what topic of conversation wouldn't lead us to some sort of trouble. And it felt like maybe I was right when the first thing Carrie said was that she wanted to talk about the possibility of her having those girls' nights with her mom and sister. We'd essentially punted on that topic during our last counseling session. Other things had come up that had escalated tensions and the therapist said we probably weren't in the best place to make a good decision about any of it at that moment. But since she'd spent a day and a half with my MIL and SAL, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised it came back up. I was surprised that she offered another compromise. She didn't have to cut her work hours down to part-time, she'd just have to adjust hours on other days so she could leave early on the girls' nights days and come in late the following day. Apparently, she'd already cleared that with work and could start doing it whenever she wanted, even as soon as this week. She hadn't been at work since our last session, so it was obvious that she'd gotten all this clearance before we had even talked about it with the therapist. On the one hand, I could see how it was a compromise and seemed pretty fair, which was good. On the other hand, I felt sort of misled, not sure that's the right word. Like she had made the compromise about the weekend to soften me up for the possibility of agreeing to girls' nights. I'll say that might be me being paranoid or overly suspicious, and that's probably a direct result of how many "she's planning to cheat or already is" comments I've gotten here. But just because you're paranoid, that doesn't mean they're not out to get you, right? I did my best to ignore the paranoia but also get to what was starting to worry me. I asked her flat out why having a weekly girls' night with her mom and sister, something she'd never done before, was so important to her now, especially since both MIL and SAL are very actively against our marriage. I said I didn't want to cut her off from them or prevent her from having some fun and an escape, but the idea of her spending an entire night out drinking and in situations where there's a pretty high likelihood of venting/complaining about relationships with two people who might be inclined to encourage her worst instincts when it came to our relationship made me really anxious. I didn't suggest that she might be using it as an opportunity to cheat. I didn't even let on that the thought that she might find someone else had crossed my mind, or the minds of a lot of anonymous Redditors. I stayed as far away from any of that as possible and tried to keep the conversation focused on my worries about her spending that much time with my MIL and SAL. Carrie said she understood. She said that was a reasonable concern, especially given all that she'd shared in our sessions about her mom's feelings toward me. And she said that, normally, she'd probably give in and stay home and spend that time with me and the kids. But, she said, my sister needs me, right now. Her husband left her. Apparently, BAL left SAL the day after the family's annual 4th of July party. My in-laws have way too many holiday get-togethers, and my SAL is not taking it well. And when SAL doesn't take something well, my MIL takes it worse, and since BAL was the golden boy, the perfect son-in-law, the one I was always unfavorably compared to, there's a lot of upset and anger and sadness, and Carrie feels like she needs to spend time with her family to support her sister. She wants to help SAL navigate suddenly being a single parent and help her figure out if she can find a way to reconcile with BAL, and basically act like SAL's conscience and keep her from making any bad choices while there's still the possibility of saving her marriage. Bad choices like hooking up with some random dude at a bar during one of their girls' nights. Which, as I found out last night in counseling, is exactly the reason BIL left her. She cheated on him. So, my wife is asking me to be okay with her spending nights out with her mother, who hates me, and her sister, who's a cheater and hates me, and not feel any kind of way about all that. And even if I do, it doesn't really matter, as SAL needs her and Carrie's already made it all good with work, and in doing that she was compromising on what she really wanted and had asked for, and that's a good thing and a sign of progress for our own reconciliation, and both Carrie and our therapist think if I can just see it in those terms, I'll realize that there's nothing to be worried or upset about. Which is how I got here. Writing an update to Reddit while my daughter is napping in her crib next to me and my wife is on her way to her mother's house for girls' night, which got moved to Friday night thanks to the holiday, so she doesn't even have to worry about work tomorrow. And I am just fine with that. Really. I'm totally, 100% fine with it. I even told Carrie that on her way out the door. Go ahead, Reddit. Tell me I'm an idiot. An idiot trying to cling to any small steps in the right direction for his family, but still an idiot. I may update later on the other sub about the last 2 MC sessions because they were both a lot, but this post was already a freaking novel. And I'm still processing everything I've heard from Carrie and the therapist. I'm slow when it comes to stuff like that. Let me know if anyone cares to hear about it, after you get done yelling at me in the comments. TLDR, wife and I compromised over holiday weekend plans. We spent time together as a family and it was good. She still wants girls' nights because her sister's husband just left her after she cheated on him during a night out. Relevant comments. Commenter. Okay, so I read a bunch of your old posts. You've basically chosen a wife who's reproducing the dynamic you were raised with. Your parents neglected you and made you feel second best. They reinforced your feelings didn't matter. Deep down inside you feel like you are unlovable, and that's why you tolerate this kind of behavior in both relationships. You don't think you can do better than this shit show. You cling to your wife's redeemable qualities instead of looking at how she's basically emotionally abusing you. And all of this being witnessed and felt by your kids too, don't forget that. I don't know what circumstances led to you losing your job, but a spouse rejecting their partner over a jobless is not reasonable. Unless you were doing drugs or being reckless or something. Your marriage is not salvageable, but you cling to the hope of repair because subconsciously you think, if you can't fix it, you truly are unlovable and all your deepest fears are true. That's the only reason you're still here and allowing this woman to walk all over you. Your deep fears are not true, but you won't be able to look at your personal baggage and unpack it unless you're out of this mess. You're gonna keep reinforcing the message that you're not worth it. You will keep bending to irrational behavior. You will also reinforce to your kids that this is what relationships are. You need to plan to leave. Talk to a lawyer quietly. Your wife and her family are gonna try to screw you on custody and alimony. See if quitting one of your jobs will reduce the chance, or if you can get proof your wife was unwilling to work more. Anyway, you have a long road ahead of you. This won't get better. Your wife still chose her family by leaving. Even if she cut the trip short, she still got her way with the girls' night, and you can best believe she is hearing from her family how much you suck. I wish you the best because you're really truly lost. You need to focus on being single, co-parenting, and working through your issues so you don't start a new relationship subconsciously repeating the same toxic dynamic you've known and tolerate since you were a kid. 10th post. Why do only the negatives linger? Posted on the user's profile. Posting this to my profile instead of an update because it's mostly just a vent. I'm sitting in the waiting room, killing time until my therapy session. My old individual therapist is squeezing me in tonight for an emergency session before being able to get me on the regular schedule next week. And I made the mistake of checking my notifications. Stupid move on my part. I've gotten lots of comments on my posts, and for the most part, they've all been on my side, for lack of a better phrase. I've lost count of how many people think I should cut and run and tell me I'm being abused. Even if I don't agree with that, it's still support and I should cling to that. But I don't. Only the negative comments linger. They're the only ones that stick with me. The constant beat of it being all my fault, that I'm the actual abuser, that I don't care and don't step up as a dad or as a husband. The reminders of how badly I messed up and that I shouldn't expect forgiveness. Today, I almost posted in one of the abusive relationship subs because a few of the comments and some of the DMs had me thinking that maybe I don't deserve to be treated as I have been. That maybe I shouldn't be feeling as unlovable as I do. That I should have a little more pride and a little more self-esteem and stop accepting crappy and unfair treatment. And then while sitting here, I got into a back and forth with a Redditor who clearly believes that I am the problem. And I kept defending myself even though I know there's no point and I'm just making it worse. But I just keep wanting to scream and make them see because they just keep twisting everything I say and ignoring any parts of my posts that go against their version. But all it does is make me feel crazy. And ridiculous. And like an idiot for saying anything. Like I am 100% wrong and there is no reason for me to be sitting in this waiting room because I can solve the whole issue by just accepting the blame. And I'll look back on this post later tonight and feel ashamed that I said it, that I put it out there, that I was so damn needy and so desperate that I couldn't just keep my mouth shut. And that's all I'm going to hear. That's all my brain will remember. Why is that? Why do we do things like that to ourselves? And why can't we just stop? 11th post. Update 2. Ada for asking my wife to choose between her family and ours. Posted in r/Ada. Previous posts in my history. Can't get linking to work on mobile. Not the update I had planned for. I thought I was going to post about the revelations in marriage counseling and more about my own therapy session. And instead, I'm writing this while sitting in an uncomfortable pleather chair in the family lounge of our local children's hospital, where I've been for about the last 24 hours. Long story short, my son fell down the stairs in our house. At minimum, he broke his arm. I say at minimum because they've been evaluating him for head trauma and there are questions as to what caused the fall. We have very specific rules for the stairs with him. No socks or footy PJs. Always hold the railing. Go very slowly. And if mom or dad are there and not holding his sister, hold one of their hands. He was good on the first 3. We even installed a second railing below the first one, at a more age-appropriate height. He had a grip on it. But I was the only one home and was carrying his sister down the stairs, so he didn't take my hand. I don't know what happened, exactly. I described it like 20 times to the doctors and to my wife. But it's still not entirely clear. He was down 3 steps and his foot was out to go down 1 more and then he just stopped. And then dropped. It was about 6 more steps to the bottom and I chased but couldn't get there, and I think it was when he hit the landing that his arm broke. But he didn't even cry out. I called 911 and then my wife but had to leave her a voicemail, and how the fuck do you leave that message without sounding like it's the end of the damn world? I don't even remember what I said. But then the ambulance was there and off we went to the hospital, and here we've been since. My wife met us there a couple hours later, which was after they'd given my son some children's painkillers and something to calm him down a bit. They explained them all to me, but I don't remember fuck all except him crying, so at least she didn't have to see the worst of it. My in-laws and parents have both come by and my daughter is with my parents now. There was no drama like at the zoo, as apparently we're all able to be adults when the kid is hurting. And no, before someone asks, my wife wasn't at girls' night. She had a massive work event for all the offices in our region that was being held 2 hours away. She got back as quickly as she could. No one, including my wife or her mom or the doctors, has blamed me for what happened. The guilt is eating me alive, though. I should have been quicker. I should have been in front of him and not behind him. Hell, the only reason I'm even writing this is because my wife is in with him and she told me to take a break because she saw how bad it was getting for me. Like it or not, she still knows me pretty well. And I guess I just needed to see it in writing, on the screen, to see if it might make any more sense. It doesn't. I expect we're going to be here a while longer. I haven't slept since Wednesday night. I might crash in this awful chair and try to shut off my brain. Or I might respond to the MSGs in my inbox that I haven't gotten to. With my family not here and Ellie off on her final family camping trip of the season, y'all are about the only people I've got to talk to when I take a mental health break. I'll update when I can. Hopefully, it will be less busted arms and head trauma and more AL cheated and it's all BIL's fault. Dr. Son fell down the stairs. Broken arm and maybe head trauma. Family all came to the hospital. No drama ensued. I'm feeling guilty as hell. Edit, we're being released today. He's in good spirits and excited to have everyone sign his cast. And he's already bonked me in the head with it twice. Thank you everyone for all the supportive MSGs. Relevant comments. Commenter. You did everything you could, and accidents happen. It's okay to feel guilty, but it's not your fault. Take a breath and lean on your family, wishing your son a smooth recovery. Commenter. I worry based on what you said that he may have possibly had a seizure. I highly recommend you ask the doctors to do an EKG for him. It's not normal for a perfectly healthy child to drop out of nowhere, unlike if he just missed a step. I wish you all safety in this difficult time. You did everything right. OP. My very basic WebMD search while I was waiting in the hospital led me to the same conclusion, and, as it turns out, the actual doctors think so, too. We'll be seeing a neurologist soon, though we did meet with a neuro attending in the hospital who was less than helpful. That was the last post as of September 12, 25. What are your thoughts, viewer? Please follow if you enjoyed. I never generate fake stories using AI, never have multiple parts.